In Natasha and Her Illegitimate Child in a Muslim Society by Dr. A. Ahmed, the outstanding leaders among the Sudanese community in Canada are described in detail as the community evolves over time. According to the novel, after many years and significant social changes, 3 Sudanese individuals become particularly prominent and respected leaders. 1. Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din. Role: spiritual leader of the Muslim Muhajirin group in Calgary. Background: after serving time in prison, Yasser reinvents himself as a devout Muslim leader, becomes a celebrated Quran reciter, and marries the daughter of a prominent Pakistani imam. He is highly honored among many Muslims, especially members of the Muhajirin group, and receives awards for his social and spiritual contributions. Influence: he is known for his charismatic leadership, his testimony about his past, and his ability to attract followers and financial support from Muslim countries. However, his leadership is controversial due to his criminal past and extremist activities. 2. Pastor Wahid Muhammad Ahmed. Role: respected leader of the Sudanese church in Calgary, as well as pastor of an Arabic church and an English Canadian church. Background: Wahid is a former Muslim who converted to Christianity, uniting previously divided Sudanese Christian communities, Dinka, Nuer, Shilluk, into one strong Sudanese church. He is also a director of the Campus Crusade Group and is active in evangelism and church planting across Canada and internationally. Influence: he is loved and respected by many in the Christian community for his dedication, outreach, and ability to bridge divides among Sudanese immigrants. 3. Dr. Sami Shams al-Din. Role: president of the Combined Sudanese Association in Calgary. Background: an atheist and secularist. Dr. Shams al-Din is neither Muslim nor Christian, but is respected for his fairness and ability to unite the previously divided Arab Muslim and African Christian Sudanese communities into one association. He is known for treating all members equally and for his efforts to foster unity and cooperation. Influence: he is highly valued by both Arab Muslim and African Christian Sudanese immigrants for his leadership and inclusive approach. Summary table. Name, role/title, community/influence. Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din, spiritual leader, Muhajirin group, Muslim Sudanese, controversial, charismatic. Pastor Wahid Muhammad Ahmed, pastor, Church Unifier Christian Sudanese, respected, bridge builder. Dr. Sami Shams al-Din, president, Sudanese Association, secular, unifier of Muslim and Christian groups. In summary, these 3 figures, Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din, Pastor Wahid Muhammad Ahmed, and Dr. Sami Shams al-Din, are depicted as the most outstanding and influential leaders among the Sudanese community in Canada, each representing different religious, cultural, and social perspectives. Background and identity. Pastor Wahid Muhammad Ahmed is a central figure among the Sudanese Christian community in Canada, especially in Calgary. He is a former Muslim who converted to Christianity. His conversion story is significant. He was born into a prominent Arab Muslim family, the Jalaya tribe, in Sudan, but after exposure to Christian values and the Bible, he embraced Christianity. After his conversion, he faced severe persecution from his family and the Muslim community in Sudan, including being disowned, arrested, and sentenced to death for apostasy. He escaped execution due to a bombing incident that allowed him to flee prison. Role and achievements. In Canada, Wahid becomes a respected pastor and community leader. He leads the Sudanese church in Calgary, as well as an Arabic church and an English Canadian church. He is instrumental in uniting previously divided Sudanese Christian communities, Dinka, Nuer, Shilluk, into one strong Sudanese church. He is also a director of the Campus Crusade Group and is active in evangelism and church planting across Canada and internationally. Wahid is loved and respected by many for his dedication, outreach, and ability to bridge divides among Sudanese immigrants. Personal qualities. Wahid is portrayed as hardworking, dedicated, and compassionate. He is deeply committed to his faith and to serving both his congregation and the broader immigrant community. He is also a gifted evangelist and preacher, known for his ability to connect with people from diverse backgrounds and for his outreach efforts among Muslims and Christians alike. Challenges and conflicts. Despite his success, Wahid faces hostility and slander from segments of the Sudanese Muslim community in Canada, who view him as an apostate and traitor. He is the target of rumors, character assassination, and even fatwas, religious edicts, calling for his death, especially from figures like Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din. His relationship with Natasha, the protagonist, is central to the novel's plot. Their love and eventual marriage are met with fierce opposition from both Muslim and Christian communities due to issues of faith, honor, and social stigma. Symbolic role. Pastor Wahid represents the possibility of reconciliation and unity across religious and ethnic divides. His journey from persecution to leadership in Canada highlights themes of resilience, faith, and the search for belonging. He is also a symbol of the struggles faced by religious converts and immigrants who must navigate complex identities and loyalties in a new land. In summary, Pastor Wahid Muhammad Ahmed is a complex and inspiring character who embodies the challenges and hopes of the Sudanese diaspora in Canada. He is a bridge builder, a survivor of persecution, and a leader who strives for unity and compassion in the face of deep social and religious divisions. Pastor Wahid Muhammad Ahmed has a profound and multi-layered influence on Natasha's life and development. 1. Emotional and spiritual support. Wahid provides Natasha with acceptance, love, and understanding at a time when she is deeply traumatized and ostracized by her family and community. He becomes a source of emotional stability and hope, helping her to rebuild her sense of self-worth after years of stigma and abuse. 2. Catalyst for religious and intellectual awakening. Through his own journey from Islam to Christianity, Wahid inspires Natasha to question the religious and cultural systems that have oppressed her. He introduces her to Christian teachings and encourages her to explore faith as a source of healing and empowerment. Natasha's later pursuit of religious studies and her advocacy for women's rights are directly influenced by Wahid's example and encouragement. 3. Model of resilience and reconciliation. Wahid's ability to forgive, unite, and lead across religious and ethnic divides serves as a model for Natasha. His leadership in uniting divided Sudanese Christian communities and his outreach to both Muslims and Christians show Natasha the possibility of reconciliation and bridge building, even after deep wounds. 4. Partner in love and struggle. Wahid and Natasha's relationship is marked by mutual support in the face of social hostility. Their love is a form of resistance against the forces that seek to control or destroy them. Even when their relationship faces tragic revelations and external attacks, Wahid's loyalty and compassion help Natasha survive and find meaning. 5. Encouragement for personal growth. Wahid encourages Natasha to pursue her education, speak her truth, and reclaim her narrative. He supports her academic ambitions and her quest to understand and challenge the systems that harmed her. His faith in her abilities helps Natasha transform from a victim into an advocate and scholar. Key example from the novel. After hearing that life-changing testimony, Natasha decided to pay attention to the question of religion for the first time in her life. Before that day, she spent 20 years of her life as an irreligious girl. But after that testimony, she approached Pastor Wahid and requested him to give her a copy of the Bible. Natasha's courage and determination to seek truth and dignity shine through, even as she is battered by forces beyond her control. Summary table. Wahid's influence on Natasha. Area of influence: how Wahid impacts Natasha. Emotional/spiritual provides love, acceptance, and hope. Religious/intellectual inspires questioning, faith exploration, and advocacy. Social/community models reconciliation, unity, and bridge building. Personal growth encourages education, truth-telling, and self-empowerment. Resilience supports her through trauma, stigma, and personal tragedy. In summary, Pastor Wahid is a transformative figure in Natasha's life. He helps her heal, grow, and find her voice, not only as a survivor, but as a reformer and advocate for women's rights. His influence is both personal and symbolic, representing the possibility of hope, change, and dignity in the face of overwhelming adversity. After meeting Pastor Wahid, Natasha undergoes a profound transformation emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually, according to Natasha and Her Illegitimate Child in a Muslim Society by Dr. A. Ahmed. Here's how her character changes as a result of their relationship, based on the novel's content. 1. From isolation and trauma to emotional support and hope. Before Wahid, Natasha is deeply traumatized, stigmatized, and isolated due to her experiences of abuse, social ostracism, and the burden of family honor. After Wahid provides her with acceptance, love, and understanding. He becomes a source of emotional stability and hope, helping her rebuild her sense of self-worth after years of stigma and abuse. 2. Awakening of faith and intellectual curiosity. Before Wahid, Natasha is irreligious, shaped by her parents' atheism and her own alienation from both Muslim and Christian communities. After Wahid, inspired by Wahid's own journey from Islam to Christianity, Natasha begins to question the religious and cultural systems that have oppressed her. She explores Christian teachings, requests a Bible, and finds spiritual meaning and healing in her new faith. 3. Empowerment and advocacy. Before Wahid, Natasha is a victim of cycles of violence, silence, and shame, often feeling powerless against the forces arrayed against her. After Wahid, with Wahid's encouragement, Natasha pursues higher education, specializing in religious studies and women's rights. She becomes an advocate for truth, dignity, and reform, determined to expose and challenge oppressive traditions. 4. Personal growth and resilience. Before Wahid, Natasha's life is marked by repeated trauma, guilt, and a search for belonging. After Wahid, she transforms from a victim into a survivor and reformer. She channels her suffering into a quest for understanding, education, and advocacy, ultimately becoming a symbol of resistance and hope. 5. Ability to love and trust again. Before Wahid, Natasha is wary of relationships, having been betrayed and abused by those closest to her. After Wahid, through her relationship with Wahid, she learns to love and trust again, experiencing mutual support and partnership even in the face of social hostility and tragedy. Key example from the novel. After hearing that life-changing testimony, Natasha decided to pay attention to the question of religion for the first time in her life. Before that day, she spent 20 years of her life as an irreligious girl. But after that testimony, she approached Pastor Wahid and requested him to give her a copy of the Bible. Natasha's courage and determination to seek truth and dignity shine through, even as she is battered by forces beyond her control. Summary table. Natasha's change after meeting Wahid. Before Wahid, after meeting Wahid. Isolated, traumatized, stigmatized, finds love, support, and hope. Irreligious. Spiritually adrift, explores faith, finds spiritual meaning. Victim of silence and shame, becomes an advocate for truth and reform. Powerless, searching for belonging, pursues education, becomes resilient and empowered. Wary of relationships, learns to love and trust again. In summary, meeting Wahid is a turning point for Natasha. He helps her heal, grow, and find her voice, not only as a survivor, but as a reformer and advocate for women's rights. Her journey with Wahid is one of transformation from trauma and silence to hope, empowerment, and the pursuit of justice. The reactions to Natasha's transformation after meeting Wahid are complex and deeply shaped by the cultural, religious, and social context of the novel. 1. Muslim community reaction. Hostility and outrage. The Sudanese Muslim community in Calgary reacts with intense anger and disapproval when Natasha converts to Christianity and becomes engaged to Pastor Wahid. Her transformation is seen as a betrayal of her faith, family, and community. Social ostracism. Natasha is ostracized and stigmatized. Many Muslim families cut ties with her and her grandfather, Dr. Shams al-Din, accusing them of dishonor and weakness. Threats and danger. Her conversion and relationship with Wahid provoke threats to her safety, including from religious leaders like Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din, who vows to prevent the marriage and, at times, seeks her harm. 2. Family reaction. Grandfather's support. Dr. Shams al-Din, Natasha's grandfather, is supportive of her right to choose her own path, both in faith and marriage. He stands by her despite community backlash, even at great personal cost. Extended family's rejection. In Sudan, her extended family is depicted as upholding honor culture, which leads to violence, threats, and ultimately the murder of Natasha's mother for protecting her. 3. Christian community reaction. Mixed acceptance. While some in the Sudanese and Arabic Christian churches welcome Natasha's transformation and relationship with Wahid, others are judgmental, especially when rumors and misunderstandings arise, such as the false rumor about Wahid's supposed previous marriage. Gossip and exclusion. When Natasha's relationship with Wahid faces scandal, some Christian community members spread rumors and exclude her, showing that even within the church, acceptance is not universal. 4. Broader society and media. Media attention. Natasha's transformation and the events surrounding her life become the subject of media coverage, especially as her story highlights issues of women's rights, religious freedom, and cultural conflict. Human rights and activist support. International media, human rights organizations, and women's rights activists use Natasha's story as a rallying point for reform and critique of oppressive systems. 5. Wahid's influence and personal relationships. Empowerment and growth. Those close to Natasha, especially Wahid and her grandfather, encourage her transformation, supporting her pursuit of education, faith, and advocacy. Friendship and solidarity. Characters like Almaz Abraha, her Ethiopian friend, support Natasha during her most difficult times, modeling empathy and solidarity. Summary table. Reactions to Natasha's transformation. Group/individual reaction to Natasha's transformation. Muslim community hostility, ostracism, threats, attempts to bring her back. Grandfather, Shams al-Din, support, protection, advocacy for her autonomy. Extended family, Sudan, rejection, violence, upholding honor culture. Christian community mixed, some support, others gossip and exclude. Media and activists amplify her voice, use her story for advocacy and reform. Wahid and close friends encourage, empower, and support her growth. In summary, Natasha's transformation is met with fierce resistance from the Muslim community, mixed reactions from Christians, and unwavering support from her grandfather and Wahid. Her journey becomes a symbol of resilience and the struggle for dignity and autonomy in the face of overwhelming social and religious pressures. Yasser uses multiple manipulative, social, and even violent strategies to try to separate Wahid and Natasha. Here's how he attempts to drive them apart. 1. Spreading rumors and slander. Yasser orchestrates malicious rumors about Pastor Wahid, including claims that Wahid is already married to a Muslim woman in Sudan and has children there. He bribes a newly arrived Sudanese Christian couple in Calgary to spread these rumors, knowing it will create distrust and scandal. These rumors reach Natasha and her grandfather, causing Natasha to doubt Wahid's honesty and leading to a painful rift between the couple. 2. Legal and religious pressure. Yasser leverages his influence within the Muslim community to stir outrage over Natasha's conversion to Christianity and her relationship with Wahid. He uses his status as a religious leader to rally the community against their union, framing it as a betrayal of faith and family honor. 3. Mobilizing community hostility. Yasser encourages the Sudanese Muslim community in Calgary to ostracize Natasha and her grandfather and to pressure them to end the relationship. He vows to prevent the marriage, swearing by the Quran that he will not allow a Muslim woman to marry an apostate priest like Wahid. 4. Legal action and character assassination. When rumors and social pressure fail, Yasser attempts to use the legal system by filing complaints and lawsuits, accusing Wahid and his supporters of hate speech and religious defamation. He tries to have Wahid's church shut down and his religious credentials revoked, hoping to destroy Wahid's reputation and isolate Natasha. 5. Orchestrating violence and terror. When all other means fail, Yasser escalates to violence. He masterminds a terrorist attack targeting Natasha and Wahid's wedding, intending to kill them and anyone who supports their union. Even after the attack fails, Yasser continues to plot against them, including attempts on their lives and further acts of terror. 6. Psychological manipulation. Yasser manipulates Natasha directly, confronting her with threats and emotional abuse, and later, when she discovers he is her biological father, he tries to use this revelation to destabilize her emotionally and physically. Summary table: Yasser's tactics to separate Wahid and Natasha. Tactic description/example. Rumors and slander spreads lies about Wahid's marital status and past. Legal/religious pressure mobilizes community, files lawsuits, incites outrage. Community hostility encourages ostracism, threats, and social isolation. Character assassination attempts to destroy Wahid's reputation and ministry. Violence and terror masterminds terrorist attacks and assassination plots. Psychological manipulation threatens, abuses, and destabilizes Natasha. In summary, Yasser's efforts to separate Wahid and Natasha are relentless and escalate from social and psychological manipulation to outright violence. He exploits religious authority, community influence, legal systems, and personal relationships to try to destroy their union and their lives. Natasha's reaction to Yasser's threats is marked by a complex mix of trauma, anger, courage, and, ultimately, defiance. Here's how she responds. 1. Initial shock and trauma. Natasha is initially devastated and traumatized by Yasser's manipulation, threats, and violence. His actions lead to her social ostracism, repeated cycles of harassment, forced migration, and the loss of her childhood innocence. The threats to her life, including honor-killing attempts and later terrorist plots, cause her deep fear and anxiety, but also push her toward moments of critical decision. 2. Enduring social stigma and isolation. Yasser's threats and the resulting community hostility force Natasha and her family into hiding, exile, and repeated attempts to start over. She suffers not only physically and emotionally, but also bears the brunt of her community's judgment, while Yasser largely escapes accountability. 3. Grief and guilt. After her mother is murdered in an honor attack meant for her, Natasha is overwhelmed with guilt, blaming herself for the tragedy that has befallen her family as a result of Yasser's threats and actions. 4. Anger and resolve. Natasha's pain transforms into anger and a desire for justice. She decides to expose Yasser, confessing the truth to the authorities about who impregnated her, even though it puts her at further risk. She refuses to remain silent or protect her abuser any longer. 5. Courage and defiance. Despite the threat of brutal punishment by the Sharia court and ongoing threats from Yasser, Natasha stands by her confession and refuses to recant. She faces her fate with dignity, determined to tell her story and hold Yasser accountable, even as she is sentenced to a fatal flogging. When Yasser continues to threaten her and her husband Wahid, including orchestrating terrorist attacks, Natasha does not back down. She continues to seek truth, reclaim her narrative, and advocate for herself and other women. 6. Lasting psychological impact. The cumulative effect of Yasser's threats, the violence she endures, and the loss of her family leave Natasha deeply scarred. She struggles with trauma, guilt, and, at times, a crisis of faith and identity. Yet, she also channels her suffering into a quest for understanding, education, and advocacy for women's rights. 7. Legacy of resilience. Natasha's journey, though marked by suffering, is also defined by her resilience. She survives, tells her story, and ultimately becomes a symbol of resistance against the systems and individuals that threatened and betrayed her. Key example from the novel. One of the most striking examples comes when Natasha, haunted by the violence and betrayal that have shaped her life, chooses to confront her own father, the very man who has caused her unimaginable pain. Knowing the risks, Natasha stands before him, not as a victim, but as a woman determined to reclaim her story and demand recognition of the truth. In a society where silence is often enforced by fear, Natasha's willingness to face her abuser and speak her name is an act of profound bravery. In summary, Natasha reacts to Yasser's threats with a journey from trauma and fear to courageous defiance. She refuses to be silenced or destroyed by what happened to her, and her determination to speak out and seek justice becomes a central force in the novel. Natasha discovers that Sheikh Yasser is her biological father through a combination of media investigation, personal research, and confronting evidence. How Natasha discovers the truth. Media exposure and old newspaper article. After moving to Canada, Natasha comes across a 20-year-old newspaper article that details the criminal record of Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din in Sudan. The article describes how Yasser impregnated a young girl named Natasha Sami Shams al-Din twice, leading to her public disgrace and execution by flogging, and the murder of her Russian mother in an honor attack. The article includes names, locations, and events that match Natasha's own family history, her mother's name, her grandfather's name, her own name, and the cities where she lived, Khartoum, Addis Ababa. Connecting the dots. Natasha realizes that the details in the article, her mother's and grandfather's names, the circumstances of her mother's pregnancies, and the subsequent family tragedies are not coincidences, but are directly about her family. She understands that the man described as the perpetrator in the article, Sheikh Yasser, is the same person who is now a prominent religious leader in her community in Canada. Personal confrontation. Armed with the article and her own suspicions, Natasha confronts Sheikh Yasser in front of his followers at the mosque. She tells him directly that she is his biological daughter and presents him with the newspaper article as evidence. In a letter she gives him, Natasha explains how she is the child born from his relationship with her late mother, Natasha Sami Shams al-Din. Yasser's reaction. Yasser is initially in denial and tries to evade the confrontation, but the evidence is overwhelming. He is shocked and realizes that Natasha is indeed his daughter, which marks the beginning of his personal and social downfall. Key passage from the novel. The above 20-year-old article has accidentally fallen in the hands of Natasha, the wife of Pastor Wahid, and has turned her life upside down. All of a sudden, her days and nights have become an unbearable living hell. She couldn't believe that those details were just coincidence. It could not be possible all those names have just coincided with her family's names. Natasha wept bitterly when she came to know that her mother and grandmother were subjected to that cruel death for small mistakes committed by her mother, Natasha. She is filled with great indignation when she understands that the cause of all her family's tragedy is Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din. At the same time, Natasha arrived at the unavoidable conclusion that her biological father is none other than the despicable and devil-incarnate man Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din. In summary, Natasha's discovery is a result of her own research, the accidental finding of a detailed media report, and her courage to confront Yasser directly with the evidence. This revelation is a turning point in the novel, leading to further trauma, but also to Natasha's determination to reclaim her story and seek justice. If you'd like, I can provide more direct passages or details about the confrontation scene. Let me know how you'd like to proceed. After Natasha discovers that Sheikh Yasser is her biological father in Natasha and Her Illegitimate Child in a Muslim Society by Dr. A. Ahmed, the revelation becomes a major turning point in the novel and sets off a series of dramatic and tragic events. 1. Emotional turmoil and confrontation. Natasha is devastated and filled with indignation after realizing that the man responsible for so much of her family's suffering is her own father. She confronts Yasser in public, presenting him with a newspaper article and a letter detailing the evidence of their relationship. 2. Yasser's dilemma and response. Yasser is shocked and initially tries to deny the relationship, but the evidence is overwhelming. He is terrified that Natasha will expose him publicly or take him to court for a DNA test, which would ruin his reputation as a respected religious leader. Yasser pretends to be remorseful and invites Natasha to his residence under the pretense of reconciliation. 3. Attempted murder and rape. When Natasha visits Yasser's house, hoping for an apology or closure, Yasser instead attacks her. He brutally beats, rapes, and attempts to murder her, tying her up and leaving her to die in his locked room before fleeing the country. 4. Natasha's rescue and aftermath. Natasha is found barely alive by the police after several days, suffering from severe injuries and trauma. She is hospitalized and eventually recovers physically, but the psychological scars are deep. A DNA test confirms that Yasser is both her biological father and her rapist. 5. Community and legal reactions. The Muslim community, including Yasser's followers and his wife's family, refused to believe the charges against him, insisting it is a conspiracy. Yasser flees to Somalia and becomes involved with terrorist groups, evading justice. The Canadian authorities issue an arrest warrant for Yasser, but he remains at large. 6. Natasha's personal struggles and transformation. Natasha is left to grapple with the trauma of rape by her father, the birth of a child from that assault, and the collapse of her marriage, which is later revealed to be with her own brother. She faces social stigma, mental health crises, and institutional betrayal, including being wrongly institutionalized as mentally ill. Despite these hardships, Natasha eventually channels her suffering into academic research and advocacy, focusing on women's rights and the critique of oppressive religious and cultural systems. In summary, the revelation that Sheikh Yasser is Natasha's biological father leads to a cascade of violence, betrayal, and further trauma. It exposes the depths of Yasser's hypocrisy and cruelty, shatters Natasha's sense of identity and safety, and becomes the catalyst for her eventual transformation into a voice for reform and resistance. Natasha's recovery journey after the traumatic revelation and subsequent violence is long, painful, and ultimately transformative. Here's how her recovery unfolds. 1. Immediate aftermath and trauma. After being brutally raped and nearly murdered by her biological father, Natasha is found barely alive and hospitalized. She suffers severe physical injuries and deep psychological trauma. She faces disbelief and denial from much of the Muslim community, who refuse to accept that a respected religious leader could commit such acts. 2. Medical and psychological struggles. Natasha spends weeks in the hospital recovering physically. She is deeply scarred, both physically and emotionally. The trauma leads to a mental health crisis. She is wrongly institutionalized as mentally ill after a Muslim psychiatrist, motivated by bias and misunderstanding, reports her as a danger to herself and others. In the mental hospital, Natasha is subjected to strong medications and electroshock therapy, which cause memory loss and leave her in a near-vegetative state for months. 3. Support from loved ones. Throughout her ordeal, Natasha's husband, Wahid, her mother-in-law, Mrs. Mary Morgas, and her Ethiopian friend, Almaz Abraha, remain by her side, visiting her, advocating for her, and caring for her children. Wahid fights to prove Natasha's sanity and innocence, gathering testimonies from friends, professors, and classmates to show she was not mentally ill before her institutionalization. 4. Legal vindication and gradual healing. A court eventually finds that Natasha was not mentally ill prior to her hospitalization and that the psychiatrist was guilty of medical negligence. After 6 months in the mental hospital, Natasha is transferred to a rehabilitation center where she slowly regains her memory and strength over more than 2 years. With ongoing support from Wahid and Almaz, Natasha gradually recovers her ability to speak, recognize loved ones, and care for her children. 5. Personal growth and academic pursuit. Natasha returns to her studies, focusing on religious studies and women in Islam. She completes a bachelor's and then a master's degree, channeling her suffering into advocacy and research on women's rights and the critique of oppressive systems. Her academic journey becomes a form of healing and empowerment, allowing her to reclaim her narrative and help others. 6. Renewed faith and purpose. After a period of agnosticism and spiritual crisis, Natasha's faith is eventually renewed. She joins a supportive church community and finds meaning in helping other women who have suffered under similar systems. She plans to travel to Sudan to conduct fieldwork for her PhD, determined to use her experience and education to advocate for reform and justice. Summary table. Natasha's recovery journey. Stage description / key events. Immediate aftermath: hospitalization, trauma, disbelief from community. Medical / psychological crisis: wrongful institutionalization, memory loss, severe depression. Support from loved ones: advocacy and care from Wahid, Mrs. Morgas, Almas. Legal vindication: court finds no prior mental illness, psychiatrist suspended. Rehabilitation and healing: gradual recovery and rehab, regains memory and strength. Academic and personal growth: completes degrees, becomes advocate for women's rights. Renewed faith and purpose: rejoins church, plans fieldwork in Sudan, helps others. In summary, Natasha's recovery is not linear or easy. It is marked by setbacks, institutional betrayal, and deep suffering, but also by resilience, the unwavering support of loved ones, and her own determination to transform pain into purpose. Her journey becomes a testament to survival, hope, and the power of reclaiming one's story. Natasha's grandfather, Dr. Sami Shams al-Din, takes a very active and methodical approach to investigating the rumors against Pastor Wahid. Here's how he investigates and what he discovers in Sudan. How Natasha's grandfather investigates the rumors. Here's the rumor in Canada. After a malicious rumor spreads in Calgary that Pastor Wahid is already married to a Muslim woman in Sudan and has children there, Natasha and her grandfather are deeply troubled. Natasha is devastated, and her grandfather is determined to find the truth. Decides to investigate personally. Dr. Shams al-Din tells Natasha not to inform anyone about his trip and travels to Sudan himself to investigate the background of Pastor Wahid and the truth behind the rumor. Visits the church in Khartoum. He goes to the church in Khartoum where Pastor Wahid supposedly had a wife and children. The church pastor and elders inform him that they have never heard of a family by that name, nor have they had a Muslim man convert to Christianity in their church. They also confirm that there is no woman and 2 children in their congregation who fit the story. Traces the source of the rumor. The church leaders mention a Christian couple, Majak and Malaika, who recently immigrated to Canada and are the likely source of the rumor. Dr. Shams al-Din realizes that this couple was bribed by Sheikh Yasser to spread false information about Pastor Wahid. Visits the village of Shahaba. He travels to the village of Shahaba, where Pastor Wahid claimed to have been born and raised as a Muslim. The village chief tells him that no one by that name has ever lived there and that they have never had a Jalaya family in their midst. The chief is shocked at the idea of a Muslim converting to Christianity. Checks Khartoum University records. Dr. Shams al-Din visits Khartoum University to verify Pastor Wahid's claim of being a student and a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. The registrar finds no student by that name, and the only similar names graduated many years ago. Documents his findings. He carefully documents all his findings in a diary, including the lack of evidence for the rumor and the fabricated nature of the accusations against Pastor Wahid. What he discovers in Sudan. The rumor about Pastor Wahid having a Muslim wife and children in Sudan is completely false. The Christian couple who spread the rumor were bribed by Sheikh Yasser. There is no record of Pastor Wahid, under his claimed Muslim name, in the village or university he mentioned. The church in Khartoum has no knowledge of him or any such family. The entire story was a malicious conspiracy designed to destroy Pastor Wahid's reputation and prevent his marriage to Natasha. Impact of the investigation. Dr. Shams Al-Din returns to Canada and shares his findings with Natasha, clearing Pastor Wahid's name. Natasha and her grandfather are relieved and feel guilty for having doubted Wahid. The truth allows Natasha and Wahid to reconcile and move forward with their engagement and marriage. In summary, Natasha's grandfather's thorough investigation in Sudan exposes the rumor as a deliberate fabrication orchestrated by Yasser. His efforts not only vindicate Pastor Wahid, but also highlight the lengths to which Yasser will go to manipulate and control others. If you'd like, I can provide direct passages from the novel or focus on a particular aspect of the investigation. The rumors against Pastor Wahid have a devastating impact on his standing and life within his church and community. 1. Loss of trust and reputation. When the rumor spreads that Pastor Wahid is already married to a Muslim woman in Sudan and has children there, it creates deep suspicion and distrust among church members and the broader Christian community in Calgary. Natasha and her grandfather, Dr. Shams Al-Din, are also affected, with Natasha doubting Wahid's honesty and withdrawing from him. 2. Forced resignation and social isolation. The rumors lead to public confrontation. Natasha's grandfather, believing the rumors, confronts Pastor Wahid in front of the church congregation and accuses him of being an impostor and immoral religious leader. The church elders and congregation, shocked by the allegations, including the claim that Wahid made Natasha pregnant out of wedlock, force Pastor Wahid to step down from his pastoral role. He is also removed from his position as a director with the Campus Crusade Group and loses his standing in the Bible College. 3. Emotional and spiritual crisis. The loss of his ministry, reputation, and the love of Natasha drives Pastor Wahid into a deep depression and suicidal crisis. He attempts to end his life, feeling he has lost everything that mattered to him. Even after the truth is uncovered and he is cleared of the rumors, some members of the Christian community remain unforgiving, and he is not fully restored to his former leadership roles. 4. Lasting stigma and division. The rumors and the resulting scandal divide the church community. Some members continue to gossip and exclude both Wahid and Natasha, showing that even within the church, acceptance is not universal. The episode highlights how malicious rumors, especially when weaponized by outside antagonists like Yasser, can destroy reputations, ministries, and relationships, even in communities that preach forgiveness. Key passage from the novel. The news of the pregnancy of Natasha by Pastor Wahid shattered his religious integrity and led the elders of the church to force him to step down. They considered him to be no longer capable of ministering to others. Instead, he needs to be counseled to. It is a total disaster for Pastor Wahid. Even the Campus Crusade Board of Directors kicked him out from his position when they came to know about the rumor of his marriage in Sudan and his illicit relation with Natasha Shams Al-Din and made her pregnant out of the wedlock. In summary, the rumors orchestrated by Yasser and spread by others lead to Pastor Wahid's public disgrace, loss of leadership, and deep personal suffering. Even after being vindicated, the damage to his reputation and ministry is not fully repaired, illustrating the destructive power of slander and the vulnerability of even well-respected leaders to malicious gossip. Pastor Wahid, Gerges Gabriel, lies about his past life in Sudan for several intertwined reasons, all rooted in trauma, survival, and the need for belonging. 1. To escape the stigma of illegitimacy. Wahid was born as an illegitimate child in Sudan, a society where being a Wad Haram bastard is a source of extreme shame and social exclusion. He was abandoned by his biological mother at birth and raised in a Christian orphanage, suffering discrimination from both Muslims and Christians. To avoid the lifelong stigma and rejection he experienced in Sudan, Wahid conceals his true origins and reinvents his identity in Canada. 2. To gain acceptance and respect. Upon arriving in Canada, Wahid realizes that his Coptic Christian name, Gurgis Gabriel, and background as an illegitimate child would make it difficult to be accepted among Sudanese and Arab communities. He changes his name to Wahid Muhammad Ahmed and claims to be a Muslim convert to Christianity, a narrative that earns him admiration and leadership roles among Sudanese Christians and Arab Christians in Canada. This new identity allows him to unite divided communities and become a respected pastor and director in various churches and organizations. 3. To protect himself from persecution. In Sudan, apostasy from Islam is punishable by death, and Wahid's fabricated story of being a former Muslim who converted to Christianity is both a shield and a tool for survival. By presenting himself as a persecuted convert, he avoids questions about his illegitimate birth and gains sympathy and support from Christian organizations and refugee agencies. 4. To avoid painful memories and trauma. Wahid's childhood was marked by abuse, rejection, and a constant search for identity and belonging. Lying about his past is also a way to distance himself from the pain of abandonment by his biological parents and the harsh realities of his upbringing. 5. To build a new life and family. Wahid's reinvention is not just for personal gain, it is also a way to build a new, dignified life for himself and, eventually, for Natasha. He wants to provide a stable, loving environment for his family, free from the shame and trauma that haunted his early years. Direct evidence from the novel. That day, Natasha did not only come to know that her husband had lied about his place of birth and family, but he fooled her about his claim to be born and brought up as a Muslim boy. He admitted that he has never been a Muslim all his life. He was born to a Muslim mother, but brought up by Christian parents. He has seen neither his mother nor his father in all his life. He learned from his Christian parents that he is an illegitimate child. His mother gave birth to him in an orphanage owned by the Christian couple who brought him up. On the same day his mother gave birth to him, she had dumped him like refuse in that orphanage and disappeared from his life forever. In addition, Pastor Wahid confessed that his real name isn't Omar or Wahid Muhammad Ahmed. He had been named by his Christian parents as Gurgis Gabriel. When he came to Canada, he changed his name to Wahid Muhammad Ahmed. He did that because he knew that Gurgis Gabriel is a Coptic Christian name. He is aware that he does not look like a Sudanese Coptic Christian, but in every way, he resembled an Arab Muslim. He learned from his Christian parents that his real Sudanese mother and father are Arab Muslims. He remembered that such a mixed-up personality created a lot of harassment and persecution for him in Sudan and led to a serious identity crisis. To avoid the recurrence of such social stigma and not to be an odd individual among the Sudanese Muslim community in Canada, he faked that false claim of being born and brought up as a Muslim, but when he grew up, he rejected Islam and accepted Christianity. In summary, Pastor Wahid lies about his past life in Sudan to escape the stigma of illegitimacy, gain acceptance and respect, protect himself from persecution, avoid painful memories, and build a new life. His deception is a survival strategy shaped by the harsh realities of his upbringing and the unforgiving social and religious systems he navigates. There is a significant scene where Sami Shams al-Din, Natasha's grandfather, reflects on the moral mistakes of both his daughter, the elder Natasha, and his granddaughter, the younger Natasha, while standing in the cemetery in Sudan. The cemetery scene, comparing two generations' moral mistakes. Context. After Natasha's grandfather, Dr. Sami Shams al-Din, travels to Sudan to investigate rumors about Pastor Wahid, his granddaughter's fiancé, he visits the graves of his beloved wife, Nadia Alexandrov, and his daughter, the elder Natasha. Standing before their tombs, he is overwhelmed by memories and grief. In this moment, he is forced to compare the similar moral mistakes made by his daughter and his granddaughter, both of whom had premarital sexual relationships that resulted in pregnancy. Key points of comparison. Same mistake, different worlds. Sami realizes that both his daughter and granddaughter made the same mistake, having sex before marriage and becoming pregnant. However, the consequences for each were drastically different because of the societies in which they lived. Consequences in Sudan, Islamic Sharia law. His daughter, Natasha, the elder, was condemned by the Sharia court for adultery, publicly disgraced, and ultimately flogged to death. The family was destroyed, his wife was murdered in an honor killing, and he was forced to flee the country with his granddaughter. Consequences in Canada, secular law. His granddaughter, Natasha, the younger, made the same mistake with her fiancé, Pastor Wahid, in Canada. In Canada, this act was not considered a crime. There was no public disgrace, no legal punishment, and no threat to her life or family. The family could continue, and the mistake was treated as a private matter, not a public or legal catastrophe. Reflection on law and culture. Sammy is struck by the contrast between the two legal and cultural systems. He notes that in Sudan, under Sharia law, the same act led to brutal punishment and the destruction of a family. In Canada, under secular law, the same act is not criminalized and the family is not destroyed. Moral and emotional response. Sammy does not blame his granddaughter for her actions, recognizing that the context and consequences are entirely different. He is filled with sorrow for his daughter, who suffered and died because of a system he now sees as unjust and cruel. He feels guilt and regret for not being able to protect his daughter, and relief that his granddaughter is not subjected to the same fate. Direct reference from the novel. While he was standing before their tombs, the memories of their brutal murders assaulted him like a heart attack. His eyes poured down hot tears. His heart was filled with great indignation when he remembered that the man who caused their untimely death was living in the same city he was living in, and he could not do anything to him. While he was standing and remembering those sad days, Dr. Shams al-Din's attention was shifted from the sad past to the present reality. He was forced to make a comparison between the mistakes his junior Natasha made with her boyfriend in Canada and his senior Natasha committed with her abuser in Sudan. Both slept with their lovers out of the marriage bonds, and both were impregnated because of those lapses. Those mistakes happened in different times and different places. The senior Natasha was arrested, tried, and convicted of adultery by the Islamic Sharia court and punished in the cruelest way that the person would ever be punished. The mistake of the junior Natasha was not considered to be criminal in nature, and no one took her to court to sleep with her boyfriend before marriage. Dr. Shams al-Din was amazed by the two different cultures in which the two mistakes were committed by his daughter and granddaughter, which one was based on the Islamic Sharia law and the other on the Canadian secular law. Being an atheist and irreligious man, Dr. Shams al-Din could not be able to trace the sources of those two different laws. Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace, established the law of forgiveness, and Muhammad, the founder of the Islamic Sharia law, created the law of punishment. History tells us that Jesus forgave an adulterous woman, whereas Muhammad stoned her to death. Summary table. Aspect: daughter Natasha, Sudan. Granddaughter Natasha, Canada. Society/law Sharia, honor-based, secular, rights-based. Consequence: public disgrace, death, no legal/social punishment. Family impact: destroyed, exiled family continues. Sammy's reflection: sorrow, regret, anger, relief, gratitude. In summary, Sammy Shams al-Din, in the cemetery, compares the identical moral mistakes of his daughter and granddaughter and is struck by how the surrounding society and its laws determine whether a mistake leads to tragedy or is simply a part of life. He mourns the cruelty of the system that destroyed his daughter and is grateful that his granddaughter is spared such a fate. Certainly. Here's a detailed comparison of societal reactions in Sudan and Canada to premarital pregnancy and moral mistakes, as depicted in Natasha and Her Illegitimate Child in a Muslim Society, by Dr. A. Ahmed. Sudan, societal reaction, Islamic/Sharia context. Stigma and shame. In Sudan, premarital pregnancy is seen as a catastrophic disgrace. The woman and her family are subjected to intense social stigma, gossip, and public shaming. The honor of the entire family is considered tainted. Family pressure. Families face immense pressure to restore honor. Options include honor killing, murdering the girl to cleanse the family's reputation. forcing the man to marry the girl if possible, hiding the pregnancy, sometimes by killing the newborn, fleeing to another city or country to escape scandal. Legal consequences. The legal system, based on Sharia law, criminalizes premarital sex and pregnancy. The woman can be arrested, tried, and punished for adultery, zina, even if she is a minor or a victim of deception/rape. Punishments include flogging, as in Natasha's mother's case, who was flogged to death, or even stoning if married. The man often escapes punishment, especially if he flees or denies responsibility. Community response. The community is complicit in enforcing these norms. Neighbors, relatives, and religious authorities may encourage or demand harsh punishment. There is little sympathy for the woman. She is seen as the source of shame. Extended family may threaten violence or cut ties with the disgraced family. No support systems. There are no safe spaces, legal protections, or social services for victims. Orphanages are illegal for Muslims. Adoption is forbidden. Abortion is a crime. The woman is left isolated, vulnerable, and often in mortal danger. Canada, societal reaction, secular/Western context. Protection and support. In Canada, premarital pregnancy is not criminalized. The woman is treated as an individual with rights and dignity. If underage, she is considered a victim, especially if the man is much older, as in the case of Brittany. Legal response. The law protects minors and punishes adult perpetrators. The man, Yasser, is prosecuted for statutory rape, kidnapping, providing drugs/alcohol to a minor, and other offenses. The girl is placed in foster care, offered counseling, and given the option for abortion or support as a young mother. The focus is on rehabilitation and protection, not punishment. Community and social services. Social workers, police, and the legal system intervene to safeguard the minor. There is public sympathy for the victim. The perpetrator is condemned. The family is not shamed or ostracized. Instead, the system tries to help them. Media and advocacy. The media may cover the case, often highlighting the need for child protection and the dangers of cultural misunderstandings. Women's rights and child protection organizations advocate for the victim. Direct comparison table. Aspect Sudan, Sharia/Islamic, Canada, secular/Western. Victim status criminalized, shamed, punished, protected, rehabilitated. Family impact dishonor, violence, exile supported, not blamed. Legal system punishes woman, rarely man punishes perpetrator, protects victim. Community attitude stigma, pressure for violence, sympathy for victim, outrage at abuser. Support systems none, isolation, danger, social services, counseling, foster care. Media/advocacy rare, may reinforce stigma, highlights victims' rights, advocates for reform. Summary. In Sudan, society reacts with harshness, violence, and legal punishment toward the woman and her family, prioritizing honor over compassion or justice. In Canada, society reacts with protection, legal action against the perpetrator, and support for the victim, prioritizing individual rights and child welfare. This contrast is a central theme in the novel, used to critique the dangers of honor-based and patriarchal systems and to highlight the importance of human rights and compassion. The long-term effects of societal reactions in Sudan and Canada on victims are profound and dramatically different. Here's a focused comparison with examples from the novel. Sudan, long-term effects on victims. 1. Trauma and psychological damage. Victims like Natasha, the elder, endure lifelong trauma from social stigma, violence, and public punishment. The threat or reality of honor killings, public flogging, and family rejection leads to deep psychological scars, PTSD, and a sense of worthlessness. Even survivors, like Natasha's granddaughter, carry the burden of family shame, fear, and anxiety about their safety. 2. Social isolation and exile. Victims are ostracized by their families and communities, often forced to flee their homes, cities, or countries. Extended family and society may cut all ties, leaving victims without support networks. The need to hide or escape can result in a life of exile, instability, and rootlessness. 3. Destruction of family structure. The entire family suffers. Parents may be pressured to kill or abandon their children, marriages are destroyed, and siblings are separated. The stigma of illegitimacy or moral failure can haunt multiple generations, affecting marriage prospects and social standing. 4. Physical harm and death. Victims face physical violence, flogging, beatings, murder. In the novel, Natasha's mother is murdered in an honor attack, and Natasha herself is flogged to death by the Sharia court. 5. Suppression of voice and agency. Victims are often silenced, unable to tell their stories or seek justice. Speaking out can lead to further punishment or violence, reinforcing cycles of secrecy and shame. Canada. Long-term effects on victims. 1. Recognition as victims and access to support. Victims like Brittany are recognized as victims of abuse, not criminals. They receive legal protection, counseling, foster care, and social services. There is an opportunity for rehabilitation, education, and recovery. 2. Reduce stigma and social reintegration. While trauma remains, victims are not publicly shamed or ostracized. The focus is on healing and reintegration into society, rather than punishment or exile. 3. Legal and social accountability for perpetrators. The abuser, Yasser, is prosecuted and imprisoned, shifting blame and responsibility away from the victim. This can help victims reclaim a sense of justice and personal dignity. 4. Potential for recovery and advocacy. Victims may become advocates, using their experiences to help others or push for reform. There is space for personal growth, education, and empowerment. 5. Ongoing challenges. Despite support, victims may still struggle with trauma, trust issues, and identity crises. The novel shows that, even in Canada, victims can face disbelief, institutional failures, or secondary trauma, e.g., wrongful institutionalization. Direct examples from the novel. Natasha, Sudan, endures repeated trauma, is publicly flogged to death, and her family is destroyed. Even her surviving granddaughter carries the scars of exile, loss, and identity crisis. Brittany, Canada, is treated as a victim, placed in foster care, and given a chance to recover. The perpetrator is punished, and she is offered support to rebuild her life. Summary table. Aspect Sudan, Sharia/Islamic, Canada, secular/Western. Victims status criminalized, punished, silenced, protected, supported, heard. Family impact destroyed, exiled, shamed, supported, encouraged to heal. Long-term trauma deep, often fatal, generational present but mitigated by support. Social reintegration rare, often impossible possible, encouraged. Voice/agency suppressed, punished, encouraged, sometimes empowered. Conclusion. In Sudan, harsh societal reactions lead to lifelong trauma, social death, and often physical death for victims and their families. In Canada, while trauma is real, the system's focus on protection, support, and justice allows for the possibility of healing, recovery, and a future. The novel provides a nuanced and realistic answer to whether victims can recover in either Sudanese, Sharia-based, or Canadian, secular society. Here's a summary based on the text. Sudan, Sharia/Islamic society. Recovery is rare and often impossible. Victims face overwhelming barriers. The combination of legal punishment, social stigma, family rejection, and the threat of violence, including honor killings, makes recovery extremely difficult. Psychological and physical trauma is often permanent. Victims like Natasha's mother are publicly flogged to death. Others are exiled, ostracized, or live in constant fear. Even survivors, like Natasha's granddaughter, carry deep, lifelong scars. No support systems. There are no safe spaces, counseling, or legal protections for victims. Speaking out or seeking help can lead to further punishment or violence. Cycles of trauma. The shame and consequences can haunt multiple generations, affecting marriage prospects, mental health, and family structure. Example from the novel. Natasha's mother is executed, her grandmother is murdered, and her grandfather is forced into exile. Even Natasha, who survives, is haunted by trauma, identity crises, and the legacy of violence. Canada, secular/Western society. Recovery is possible, but not guaranteed. Victims are recognized and supported. The legal system treats victims, like Brittany, as individuals in need of protection and rehabilitation, not as criminals. Access to support. Victims receive counseling, foster care, social services, and legal protection. There is a focus on healing, education, and reintegration. Potential for advocacy and empowerment. Some victims, like Natasha, the granddaughter, eventually become advocates, scholars, or activists, using their experiences to help others and push for reform. Ongoing challenges. Even with support, recovery is not easy or automatic. Victims may still struggle with trauma, trust issues, and identity crises. The novel shows that institutional failures, e.g., wrongful institutionalization, can still occur. Example from the novel. Brittany is placed in foster care, given the option for abortion, and receives psychological and social support. Natasha, after years of trauma and setbacks, including wrongful institutionalization, eventually regains her health, completes her education, and becomes an advocate for women's rights. Key insights from the novel. In Sudan, recovery is nearly impossible due to systemic oppression, lack of support, and the threat of violence. Even survivors are left with deep, unresolved trauma. In Canada, recovery is possible, but not guaranteed. The system offers support and the chance for healing, but victims may still face setbacks, stigma, or institutional failures. With time, support, and resilience, some victims can rebuild their lives and even thrive. Direct quotes from the novel. Natasha's recovery is not linear or easy. It is marked by setbacks, institutional betrayal, and deep suffering, but also by resilience, the unwavering support of loved ones, and her own determination to transform pain into purpose. Her journey becomes a testament to survival, hope, and the power of reclaiming one's story. In Sudan, harsh societal reactions lead to lifelong trauma, social death, and often physical death for victims and their families. In Canada, while trauma is real, the system's focus on protection, support, and justice allows for the possibility of healing, recovery, and a future. Summary table. Society: can victims recover? Conditions for recovery: typical outcome. Sudan: rarely, if ever only possible through escape/exile, no support, high risk of violence, lifelong trauma, social death, or physical death. Canada: sometimes with legal/social support, counseling, and personal resilience, possible healing, advocacy, reintegration, but setbacks and trauma may persist. In conclusion, victims in Sudanese society almost never recover due to systemic, cultural, and legal barriers. In Canadian society, recovery is possible and supported, but not automatic. Trauma can persist, but with help, victims can rebuild their lives.